pleasure of human relationship.
Exact same way. He's keeping the skin. He's preserving the skin primarily for the color.
You really mean that to Mae Jones. It's Saturday afternoon.
They were once the heartbeat of every American kitchen. Now they've vanished without a trace, like a family recipe no one bothered to write down. What else have we lost in the slow disappearance of the kitchens we grew up in? There was a time when flour was not just something you kept in a bag in the pantry. In the mid-20th century, many kitchens came with a built-in flour bin right in the counter, an aluminum drawer that pulled out like a bread box and held pounds of flour at once. At the bottom of that bin, a small metal crank-operated sifter attached directly to the front panel. You turned the handle and watched flour fall like powdery snow into a bowl. Housewives loved it because it was fast, tidy, and always right where you needed it. There was a rhythm to it. The soft grind of metal, the whisper of sifted flour, the calm before the dough. It was not just about baking, it was about the ritual that came before it. But as kitchens got sleeker and flour got sold in resealable paper bags with built-in spouts, this feature disappeared. New cabinets were built without them, and most people never even noticed. Today, the few remaining ones are either sealed shut or filled with junk no one wants to deal with. You can find one in an old home and still smell the ghost of biscuits and pie crusts. But no one teaches you how to use the crank anymore. Like so many kitchen traditions, it quietly faded into the background, and now it lives only in memory, or maybe in Grandma's house if you are lucky. When did our tools become so disposable? Screwed directly into the wall, these heavy-duty wall-mounted can openers were as stubborn as they were convenient. Usually found right next to the stove or sink, they were the type of kitchen gadget you used without thinking, until you bumped your head into one or sliced your finger trying to clean it. You locked in the can, turned the large handle, and heard that satisfying scrape as the lid peeled away. And it never moved. That was the point. It was always there, ready to go. Back then, cans did not have pop-tops, and handheld openers were prone to rust or breaking. So this chunky mechanical beast became part of the kitchen wall like a light switch. It made even the smallest task feel intentional, like you were part of a well-oiled machine. And it never broke, because it was made to be used, not replaced. Some people even bragged about how fast they could open a can of tomato soup. But as kitchens modernized and designers chose clean lines over utility, wall-mounted can openers became kitchen fossils. They were ripped out and tossed away, their holes patched up and painted over. Now, most folks do not even recognize them. But if you ever find one, run your hand along the gear teeth. It might just stir something in you. Why did we stop building things to stay put? It is hard to explain to someone today why there would be an ironing board in the kitchen. But for generations of American homemakers, ironing while cooking made perfect sense. You could press shirts while pasta boiled. The ironing board lived behind a narrow cabinet door, usually next to the fridge or near a pantry wall. You would open the latch, fold it down, and start ironing right there on the linoleum. It made the kitchen feel like a command center. Meals, laundry, homework, all happening at once. Some were even wired with built-in sockets, so you could plug in your iron without running cords across the room. There was something deeply efficient and strangely comforting about handling both dinner and dress shirts in the same breath. It made the kitchen feel like the heart of everything, not just the place where food was made. It sounds absurd now, but back then it was the ultimate multitasker's dream. Eventually, fashion changed, and so did fabrics. Permanent press clothing came along, and ironing became less of a daily ritual. Builders stopped including these wall units, and the ones that remained often jammed or collected dust. Today, a recessed ironing board in the kitchen wall feels like something out of a time capsule. You can still see the outline on painted-over cabinet doors in old houses. But no one's waiting on the kettle while smoothing out their slacks anymore. What else have we quietly stopped doing? If your grandmother had a nutmeg grater drawer, you already know this was not about convenience. It was about pride. Tucked away like a secret compartment, this tiny wooden drawer usually had a built-in metal grater inside, fixed to the bottom or back wall. You would slide it open, pop in a whole nutmeg, and grate just enough to finish your pumpkin pie or rice pudding. It was oddly luxurious for such a tiny task. People swore that freshly grated nutmeg was leagues above the powdered kind from the store. And in kitchens that ran on rituals, this mattered. Nutmeg had a smell that meant something. Holidays, Sundays, a warm drink on a cold evening. It was the finishing touch, the kind of detail that showed you cared about flavor, not just filling bellies. One twist of that drawer and the kitchen felt instantly more personal. But as time went on, spice blends got pre-mixed, and the grater drawer seemed too specific for modern use. Most disappeared when newer cabinets came in. The metal rusted, the drawer warped, and eventually it was either nailed shut or tossed out with the old silverware. But once, it was a mark of a thoughtful kitchen, one where flavors came from effort, not a jar. Next time you taste store-bought eggnog, ask yourself, what tiny traditions did we leave behind? A countertop garbage chute might sound like science fiction, but it was once the definition of practical design. Picture this: a hinged square in the middle of your kitchen counter that popped open to reveal a direct drop into the trash bin below. You could chop carrots, peel potatoes, and then sweep the scraps in one motion. No fiddling with a trash can lid, no extra step. Just a quick flick of the wrist, and it was gone. In mid-century kitchens, these were genius, especially when you were making big meals and needed all the counter space you could get. It made cleanup feel like part of the flow, not an afterthought. One swift motion and the mess was gone before it had time to become a problem. But eventually, people began to worry about smells, pests, and hygiene. Builders stopped including the feature, and home cooks grew wary of having an open hole in the counter, even if it had a lid. Most of them were sealed shut or removed entirely during remodels. Today, you will only find them in untouched kitchens from the 1940s or 1950s. They are almost always covered in laminate or chrome trim, like a forgotten piece of spaceship tech. What other clever shortcuts have we erased without even realizing it? Warming drawers used to be the quiet hero of the kitchen, especially when dinner was not ready all at once. Tucked just below the oven, this thin, shallow drawer kept plates warm so that food would not go cold before it reached the table. You would set it to low, slide in your dishes, and when the roast came out, everything was ready to serve piping hot. This feature was a nod to formality. Meals meant something, and every detail mattered. Back then, no one wanted to pile roast beef onto a cold plate. But as life sped up and microwaves took over, warming drawers started disappearing. They took up space. They were easy to forget about. And soon, they felt like a relic of a more elegant time. Builders stopped including them in standard models, and even higher-end kitchens started to phase them out. Now, if you see one, it is usually mistaken for a storage drawer. But once, it meant warmth, literally and figuratively. It meant taking care, not just serving food. When did we stop setting the table like it was worth it? Behind the smooth cabinet doors of many mid-century kitchens hid a surprising tool, a pull-out dish drainer that lived inside the wall. After washing dishes, you would slide out the rack, load it up, and let everything drip dry behind closed doors. It kept counters clear, made the kitchen look tidy, and gave a sense of order that matched the rest of the house. Some even had small trays underneath to catch the water. It was not about hiding the mess. It was about making space feel peaceful. When plastic racks and countertop drainers became standard, these hidden drying systems quietly disappeared. New kitchens no longer had room for them, and they were hard to clean and prone to mold. But there was something thoughtful about them, something neat, something kind of charming. Now, we just pile dishes in the sink or leave them out for hours. The idea of drying dishes out of sight feels like something from a different era, one where appearances mattered, but so did small comforts. What else have we stopped tucking away for the sake of convenience? The electric hot plate built into the countertop was not meant to replace the stove. It was there for the in-between moments, the simmering, the reheating, the lonely cup of soup on a gray afternoon. It looked like a single stovetop coil embedded right into the counter, usually near the sink or beside the coffee station. You turned the knob and it glowed red. No pots stacked on burners, no full stove required. For single servings or quick boils, it was perfect. They became especially popular in the 1950s and 1960s during the height of the modern kitchen boom. They were sleek, functional, and felt futuristic. But they came with risks. Open coils got hot fast, stayed hot longer, and were sometimes forgotten. Over time, homeowners chose to have more counter space instead. The coils vanished, replaced with cutting boards and clean surfaces. But those hot plates once stood for independence, the idea that a small meal still mattered, that a house could be big, but one burner could still feel like home. What part of the kitchen did we lose when we made everything smooth? Before open concept became the norm, the kitchen pass-through window was the perfect compromise. It was a small rectangular opening in the wall, usually with a sliding panel or shutters that connected the kitchen to the dining room. You could serve dishes straight through, peek out to check on guests, or whisper a message without leaving your post at the stove. It was functional and a little bit fun, like a drive-through for your own home. Kids loved it because it felt like a secret door. Adults loved it because it saved steps. These pass-throughs became iconic in mid-century ranch homes and suburban houses. But as walls came down and kitchens turned into wide-open living spaces, the humble pass-through lost its purpose. Some were plastered over during remodels. Others became awkward holes in drywall with no clear use. But once, they made kitchens feel like command centers, like you could be in two rooms at once. What did we gain when we knocked down those walls? And what subtle joys did we lose? Tucked quietly beneath the sink, the under-sink water heater was one of those features you never thought about, until it saved you 5 minutes in the morning. These little tanks provided instant hot water to just one faucet. Perfect for hand washing, quick dishes, or shaving if your sink doubled as a grooming station. Unlike the giant water heater in the basement, this one was small, efficient, and practically invisible. In homes where the main water heater was far away, these under-sink units made life easier. No waiting for hot water to snake through the pipes. But over time, centralized systems improved. Builders started planning homes with better plumbing routes. Energy efficiency standards changed, and these tiny tanks were declared unnecessary. Today, most have been removed or sit unplugged, collecting dust in old houses. But their legacy lives on in those first few seconds of hot water we all take for granted. Once, someone thought of that. Once, someone made it easier. When did we stop building for the little moments? Tile countertops used to be the envy of every stylish post-war kitchen. Bright turquoise, sunny yellow, or soft pink ceramic tiles lined the counters like a checkerboard of domestic optimism. But the secret every home cook knew was this: those grout lines were a menace. They absorbed spills, caught crumbs, and stained faster than you could scrub. You might as well have been cooking on a tiled floor. Still, people loved the look. It felt cheerful, polished, and clean, at least at first glance. The tiles were cool to the touch and easy to replace if one chipped. You wiped them down after every meal, but somehow they still told the story of every spill and every stir. Those stains were not just grime, they were memories set in stone. But no matter how often you scrubbed with baking soda and vinegar, the grout lines always seemed a shade darker than the day before. Eventually, the shine wore off. Laminate, granite, and seamless solid surfaces took over. You could wipe once and be done. No more grout brushes, no more bleach, but something about those tile counters still lingers in the memory. They were imperfect, yes, but also warm and lived in. Kitchens where birthday cakes were frosted and Sunday gravy simmered for hours. When did spotless surfaces become more important than stories? Before Bluetooth speakers and smart home assistants, there was the built-in wall radio. Usually installed near the phone nook or tucked into a panel above the kitchen counter, this was your portal to the world. With one turn of a giant knob, you could get the weather, farm reports, school closings, or your favorite midday jazz station. Some had small intercom buttons for calling upstairs or out to the garage. It was kitchen multitasking before anyone used the word. Moms would hum along while stirring soup or call the kids for dinner through the built-in speaker. You knew what time it was by the voice on the radio, not your phone. It was the soundtrack of daily life, soft static, local news, and old familiar jingles. Even the quiet moments felt fuller with it playing in the background. But as media moved to TV, then to handheld devices, these built-ins became obsolete. Wires were cut, faces painted over. Now, if you find one in an old house, it looks like a forgotten control panel from a spaceship. Once, it brought life into the kitchen. Now, it is just a silent square on the wall. We carry entire sound systems in our pockets today, but they do not echo down the hallway the same way. What did we lose when the kitchen stopped singing? Imagine opening your cabinet to plan dinner and seeing a chalkboard right on the inside of the door. Some even had pull-down recipe scrolls made of parchment or linen, mounted like an old-fashioned map. You could write a grocery list, the day's menu, or a reminder that your mother-in-law was coming over. These weren't just novelty features. They were part of how a kitchen thought out loud. In a time before smartphones or sticky notes, these were the planners, the notepads, the command centers of the kitchen. And they told a story. In chalk dust and grease smudges, you could see a family's week unfold. Sometimes the writing faded, but the memory of it never did. It was handwriting that knew your routines better than you did. Eventually, they faded out. Whiteboards came in, then apps, then voice memos. Cupboards no longer had messages waiting. Now, kitchens are silent and glossy, all smooth wood and cold steel. No one scribbles meatloaf tonight inside a drawer anymore. The charm is gone, and so is the handwriting. But in old kitchens, those chalk smears still whisper what once was. When did we stop writing things down where it mattered most? There was a time when scooping flour or sugar straight from a bag was considered messy, even unsanitary. So someone had a brilliant idea. Deep wooden drawers fitted with smooth metal bins and little mounted scoopers. You would slide it open, scoop out just the amount you needed, and close it back up. No spills, no waste. It was clean, it was fast, and it made you feel like a proper baker. These drawers usually lived near the stove or prep station, and they made baking feel like a craft, like painting, but with cinnamon rolls. Every scoop felt intentional, like part of a recipe passed down through hands and time. You measured with care, not just precision. But with the rise of pre-measured mixes and bagged ingredients, the scoop drawer lost its place. Newer kitchens skipped the installation, and old ones were remodeled with plain cabinets. The bins got dusty. The scoops went missing. Now, most people would not even recognize the little hooks inside, let alone know what they were for. But they once made cooking feel personal and precise. You measured by feel, by weight, not by printed numbers on the back of a pouch. What have we traded away in the name of convenience? If you grew up in a house with a metal freezer tray, then you know the sound of cracking ice was an everyday soundtrack. These trays were heavy, often aluminum, with dividers that made perfectly square cubes. But the real star was the ice pick. Some models came with one attached right to the drawer, a thin, sharp tool that let you chip away at frozen blocks when the cubes stuck together. It felt like mining in your own kitchen. Ice was not just cold, it was something you worked for. You could hear it across the house. Metal tray, countertop edge, a sharp crack, then the tinkle of ice cubes landing in a glass. It was a cold reward for a little bit of effort. But those trays dripped, warped, and clanked. And more than one kid got a warning about using the ice pick unsupervised. Eventually, plastic trays took over, and then built-in ice makers sealed the deal. The ice pick became a kitchen relic, the trays tossed into garage sales and thrift shops. But the ritual stuck in people's minds. That sound, that effort, that tiny celebration when the tray finally gave in and released its cubes. When did ice become just another button on the fridge? Long before glass front cabinets became a design trend, there were pie safes. These were smaller display cabinets, usually lower down and built right into the kitchen cabinetry with delicate screens or patterned glass. Their job was simple: to keep pies, cookies, and cakes visible but safe. Air could circulate. Bugs could not. It was a smart design in the days before reliable refrigeration, but it was also a little bit magical. You walked into the kitchen and saw a fresh pie sitting there like a crown jewel, glowing behind the glass. It made dessert feel like an event. Even if you were too full to eat another bite, you still opened that little door just to look. It reminded you that something sweet was always waiting. But as pantries and refrigerators evolved, pie safes became unnecessary. They were harder to clean, easy to scratch, and did not match the new sleek kitchen look. Most were removed or repurposed. Some were sealed up entirely. But if you ever find one, even in a dusty farmhouse or mid-century fixer-upper, it feels like opening a time capsule, like the kitchen is still waiting for someone to cool a cherry pie. What else have we locked away behind cabinet doors and forgotten? The toe kick vacuum might sound like a modern invention, but manual versions have existed in kitchens since the mid-20th century. Located near the baseboards, these were small hidden openings you could tap with your foot. Sweep crumbs toward them, kick the slot open, and sweep the debris inside. No bending, no dustpan. Some connected to small vacuum systems. Others dropped crumbs into a bin you emptied once a week. For busy households, it was a revelation. You could clean up a whole mess without taking your hands off the mixing bowl. It turned sweeping into a single motion. Done in seconds, no need to announce it. Just one quiet, satisfying swipe, and the mess disappeared. But these systems had their downsides: clogs, maintenance, and curious toddlers. Eventually, robot vacuums and smooth floors replaced them. Toe kick openings got sealed shut, or worse, mistaken for broken drawers. But once, they were the secret weapon of clean kitchens: efficient, quiet, underappreciated, like the person doing the sweeping. When did cleaning become something we had to hide? There was a time when butter was not kept in the fridge. It lived in its own little cabinet, warm and soft, always ready to spread. These butter warming cupboards were small compartments built near the stove, using the ambient heat to keep butter at the perfect temperature. No microwave needed. No wrestling with cold sticks that shredded your toast. Just a quiet little nook, always waiting. In some houses, they had a sliding door or a carved wooden panel. Others were metal-lined or had a tiny tile floor to keep it stable. Spreading butter was not a chore. It was a pleasure, smooth and instant. There was comfort in knowing the kitchen kept your favorites ready, not hidden. But as fridges took over and health codes tightened, butter cupboards were phased out. People worried about spoilage or bugs. Builders stopped including them. Now, even the idea of leaving butter out makes people uneasy. But back then, it was common sense. You knew how much to keep out and how fast it would go. It was part of the rhythm of the kitchen, a small luxury, a daily kindness. What did we lose when even our butter got locked away cold? Built-in cutting boards were once the secret engine of the kitchen. Pull one out from under the counter, slice your veggies, and push the scraps through a hole straight into a hidden trash bin below. Clean, efficient, and kind of brilliant. No need to lift a cutting board. No mess on the counter. These were often made from thick wood and slotted right above the pull-out garbage drawer. In some kitchens, it was a full system: cutting board, chute, bin. One smooth motion. It made you feel like the kitchen was thinking with you, anticipating the cleanup before it even started. Every chop came with a sense of momentum. No pause, no backtrack. But over time, people got nervous about hygiene. Wood soaked up bacteria. The chute could clog. Designers wanted seamless countertops, not utility features. So the built-in board disappeared, and the trash chute went with it. But for people who remember them, those few seconds saved every day added up. It was a little moment of control, a small trick that made you feel like the kitchen was on your side. What else have we thrown away in the name of aesthetics? Mounted right into the countertop, the hand-cranked meat grinder was both industrial and personal. You fed chunks of meat into the top, turned the handle, and watched fresh ground beef curl out the other side. It took effort. It took time. But it made meatloaf taste like something you worked for. These grinders were heavy, bolted in place, and often inherited. They were built to last longer than the house. Families passed them down, taught kids how to grind, how to season, how to make something from scratch. There was a kind of quiet authority to it. Grinding meat meant you knew exactly what you were feeding your family. The rhythm of the crank and the thud of the meat made the whole kitchen feel alive. But then came electric grinders, grocery store pre-ground meat, and the rise of convenience. The built-ins were pulled out, the holes patched over. Some counters still bear the outline. But the idea of grinding your own meat by hand? That is nearly gone. And with it, a certain kind of pride in cooking. A belief that food was worth the work. When did the kitchen stop being a workshop? Before minimalist design swept through American kitchens, some of the most hard-working tools hung proudly in plain sight, right from the ceiling. Overhead pot racks, usually bolted into ceiling beams or hanging chains, held cast-iron skillets, copper-bottom saucepans, and enamel-coated Dutch ovens. They swung gently when someone passed by. They clanged when you reached for one without looking. And they always made the kitchen feel like it meant business. You cooked here. You sweated here. You did not just microwave leftovers and rinse plates. They were heavy, loud, and impossible to ignore, just like the kind of cooking they inspired. You always knew what was being made by the sound of the pans bumping against each other. There was something deeply satisfying about reaching up and pulling down the same pot your grandmother used to make stew every Sunday. But as open shelves and smooth lines became trendy, ceiling pot racks fell out of favor. People complained they looked messy or got in the way. Builders stopped reinforcing ceilings to support the weight. Today, most hang in restaurant kitchens or rustic-themed remodels. But in their heyday, they were a symbol of action, of noise, of food being made with love and weight and heat. What did we gain when we traded the clatter of old pans for silence? Some kitchens held secrets, hidden behind narrow wall panels you would never notice unless someone showed you. These were the swing-out spice racks, tucked into the gaps beside ovens or refrigerators. At first glance, they looked like a slice of molding or a seam in the cabinetry. But pull the small handle, and out swung a narrow shelf lined with tins of cinnamon, cloves, paprika, and dried parsley. Like a secret passage in a mystery novel, only this one smelled like Thanksgiving. They made clever use of otherwise wasted space. You did not dig through crowded shelves or reach over boiling pots. Each bottle had its place, lined up in neat rows like a library of flavor. It made the smallest ingredients feel like they mattered the most. The spices came to you. They were tidy, they were efficient, and they made the kitchen feel like it was designed by someone who actually cooked. But as prefab cabinetry became standard, these hidden compartments vanished. Too expensive, too specific, too easy to forget about. Now, spices live crammed into drawers or shoved into lazy Susans. But the swing-out rack had style, it had charm, and it made your kitchen feel like it had a few tricks up its sleeve. When did cleverness get replaced with sameness? Fixed right to the wall with heavy bolts and a big metal crank, the manual egg beater was once a proud part of any working kitchen. You would crack a few eggs into a bowl, place it under the rotating beaters, and crank until your arm ached and the mixture fluffed to perfection. It was elbow grease at its finest. These wall-mounted beaters were especially useful before electric hand mixers became affordable, and they were often placed near the prep area for easy access. You could whip cream, make meringue, or scramble eggs without hauling out extra tools. Every turn of the handle reminded you that food took effort and attention. There was no zoning out. You were part of the process from start to finish. Some even had detachable arms for easier cleaning, though most people never bothered. They just rinsed and kept moving. Over time, electric beaters and stand mixers replaced the need. Wall-mounted cranks were seen as old-fashioned, hard to clean, and visually clunky. So they were unscrewed, forgotten, or left hanging, rusted and ignored. But they stood for something, a kind of kitchen where effort was part of the flavor. A kind of meal that started with turning a handle, not pressing a button. When did convenience become more important than connection? Hidden behind cabinet doors, the pull-down kitchen scale was the kind of feature that made you feel like your kitchen had a bit of magic in it. One moment, it was just another upper cabinet. The next, you opened a small trapdoor and down came a mechanical scale, ready to weigh out flour, sugar, or dried beans. No batteries, no plastic, just gears, springs, and gravity. You measured in ounces or pounds, maybe adjusted a little dial and got to work. These scales were mounted with care and often came with a small lever or lock to keep them level. In homes where baking was a regular ritual, the pull-down scale saved time and space. It felt like a quiet little ceremony. Drop the scale, place the bowl, get it just right. Baking was not just chemistry, it was intention. But as digital scales and pre-measured mixes took over, the charm wore off. Builders stopped including them. People forgot how to calibrate them. And the idea of weighing ingredients became something only serious bakers did. But those little scales once said something about the house, that someone here paid attention. That details mattered. What does it say when we no longer care what something weighs? In the days before refrigeration reached every corner of the country, the pantry ceiling served a critical purpose. It was a place to hang the meat. Rows of metal hooks were drilled into sturdy wooden beams, ready to support hams, sausages, or the occasional turkey left to cure. The pantry smelled like smoke, salt, and thyme. It was not just storage, it was preservation. And for many families, it was survival. You would walk in, look up, and see dinner aging slowly in the air. The sight of those hanging meats told you something was always in motion, always being made. It was food becoming something else, slowly, patiently, purposefully. There was pride in it, skill, and patience. Hanging meat was not just a technique, it was a trust in the process, in nature, and in craft. But eventually, modern refrigeration and health codes rendered it obsolete. Ceiling hooks came down, pantries shrank, the air went still. Now, a hook in the ceiling is more likely to hold a pothos plant than a smoked ham. But if you find an old pantry and look up, you might still see one lonely hook, rusted and forgotten. A relic of a time when food was part of the house itself. When did we stop giving our meals the space to become something better? Speaking of things built right into the house, you are not going to believe what kind of doors were hiding inside the walls. For your milk. Picture this. You wake up, walk to the side of your kitchen, and open a tiny little door built right into your house. Behind it, a bottle of fresh milk, cool and ready to pour, maybe even some butter or cream depending on the day. No, it is not magic. That was the milk door, also called a milk chute. These small pass-through compartments were genius in their simplicity. One side opened from the outside, where the milkman would quietly place the day's delivery. The other opened from inside the house, so you never had to go out in your slippers or bathrobe. It was the drive-through window before there were drive-thrus. These doors were more than convenient. They were a sign that the world once ran on a shared rhythm. Everyone knew when the milkman came by. You could even leave payments or notes inside. Some had little shelves, others had insulation. And most people never locked them, because who would steal milk? Of course, once grocery stores and home refrigeration became widespread, the milk door quietly disappeared, sealed up, painted over, or just forgotten. But somewhere out there, behind layers of drywall, a few still exist. Hidden time capsules. At some point, someone decided mirrors did not belong on just the walls of dance studios. They belonged in your living room too. Mirrored walls were supposed to open up small spaces and reflect natural light. What they actually did was double your clutter, amplify fingerprints, and make your guests deeply uncomfortable. People would walk past their own reflections during dinner, trying not to make eye contact with themselves. The idea was chic. The reality was cold, clinical, and impossible to keep clean. What was meant to make your room look bigger ended up making it look busier, messier, and 10 times more high maintenance. And once one mirror cracked or peeled, the illusion of glamour shattered instantly. Every smudge, every streak, every greasy fingerprint stood out like graffiti. If you tried to hang art on them, you ended up with a framing nightmare. And if one cracked, it did not just ruin the wall, it shattered the illusion entirely. Mirrored walls were the visual equivalent of trying too hard, and as it turns out, they were not even the most fragile design feature of the decade. That title belonged to something hiding right above your head. The hand-crank food mill was a quiet champion in kitchens before electric blenders buzzed their way into dominance. With its simple design, a bowl, a blade, a hand crank, and a strainer, it turned soft vegetables and fruits into smooth purees with nothing but elbow grease. It did not need a plug. It just needed patience. You would place tomatoes, apples, or potatoes inside, then turn the handle slowly. Seeds, skins, and lumps were separated out, leaving a velvety mash that tasted more honest than anything a blade spinning at 10,000 rotations per minute could produce. It was ideal for baby food, applesauce, mashed potatoes, and tomato paste. And when you used it, you were not just cooking, you were tending. You were shaping food into its gentlest form. You felt connected to the process. And maybe, just maybe, the food tasted better because you worked for it. As technology took over, the hand crank mill faded into storage, its quiet rhythm replaced by roaring motors and flashing lights. But in some kitchens, it still lives, reliable, low-tech, and full of dignity. It is not fast, it is not sleek, but it reminds us that sometimes food is better when made slowly, one turn at a time. Bathroom incinerators were exactly what they sound like. Tiny metal boxes installed near the toilet, designed to burn trash right on the spot. Sounds efficient, right? Maybe. But also, just a little bit terrifying. These units were popular for a short time in the mid-20th century, mostly in homes that were obsessed with cutting-edge convenience. They were meant for tissues, cotton balls, wrappers, and small bits of waste, not, let us be clear, diapers or anything major. You would flip a switch, hear a low hum, and then wait while your trash slowly vanished into ash. It was like having a personal bonfire inside your bathroom. Some even came with a little chimney that vented outside. Of course, the smell was something. And safety? Let's just say it was a different time. These machines were prone to overheating, and if you put the wrong thing in, you might get more flames than you bargained for. Eventually, people realized that trash cans and weekly pickups were a whole lot safer. So the bathroom incinerator quietly disappeared, along with the era of lighting your garbage on fire next to your shampoo. But while the bathroom was heating up, the beauty routines of the day were getting pretty cool. And I mean that literally. Just wait until you see the hairdryers. Built-in intercom systems were supposed to be the future. Press a button in the kitchen, and you could talk to someone 2 rooms away. No yelling, no walking upstairs, just crystal clear communication across your house. Except, not really. These systems were clunky, ugly, and often broken. The audio quality was closer to a drive-through speaker than anything futuristic. Static, echoes, and random bursts of feedback became the norm, and when they did work, it often felt like you were eavesdropping more than talking. Even as a novelty, the intercom felt outdated within a few years, replaced by cordless phones and then home cell lines. What was once cutting-edge quickly became awkward background noise. People quickly realized that a cordless phone, or just walking down the hall, was faster and less frustrating. Within a decade, these systems went from high-end status symbols to forgotten wall boxes gathering dust. Some were hidden behind art, others were ripped out entirely. But if avocado green had a twin in tragedy, it was coming next. A color so bold, so sunny, and so divisive that it burned itself into America's kitchen memory forever. The hand crank egg beater was a rite of passage. Long before mixers plugged into walls, children stood on stools beside their mothers, gripping the cool metal handle and turning the crank with both hands. The beaters would spin in a blur, blending sugar, eggs, and flour into the thick beginnings of birthday cakes and pancake batter. It was not efficient, but it was intimate. You felt the recipe coming together. Your arms grew sore, but your heart grew full. The egg beater did not make noise. It did not break. It did not ask for anything but effort. Every kitchen had one, usually tucked in a drawer next to the wooden spoons and measuring cups. Its clinking metal gears were as familiar as the smell of vanilla extract. And somehow, everything tasted better when it had been beaten by hand. Then came stand mixers, food processors, and digital timers. The crank beater was cast aside as outdated, inconvenient, old. But in that loss, something human disappeared. Now it hangs on antique shop walls, a symbol of effort, patience, and care. It taught us that food was not just made, it was earned. Why did we stop believing that some things are better when you feel them in your bones? If you lived through the 1970s, you remember the feel of it between your toes. Shag carpeting was more than a design choice, it was a movement. Bold colors, thick fibers, and the kind of plush softness that made you want to lie down and never get up. From mustard yellows to burnt oranges, it blanketed floors in every room, including bathrooms, which is an idea no one has really been able to explain. Shag was fun and funky, but it was also a magnet for everything you never wanted in your house. Dust, dirt, pet hair, smells, and once it was in there, it stayed. Vacuuming was a chore. Deep cleaning was a nightmare. The very feature that made shag carpet so appealing, its thick, luxurious texture, was exactly what made it impossible to clean. People were not just pulling it up for new trends, they were trying to reclaim their air quality. What started as a symbol of comfort quickly became a maintenance disaster. Eventually, people tore it up in favor of cleaner, sleeker options. Shag rugs might have made a small comeback, but the wall-to-wall version? It is staying in the past, where it belongs. Of course, nothing trapped dust or the mood of a dark, cramped house, quite like what was hanging on the walls. That was thanks to ceiling-mounted radio speakers, built-in audio systems that piped mono sound into every room of the house. They were a mid-century dream, a touch of Jetsons-style modernity, long before smart homes were even an idea. The radio unit was usually installed in the kitchen or living room, with a big dial and a few large buttons. You could pick a station, adjust the volume, and suddenly, the whole house was in sync. Of course, these systems had limitations. There was no surround sound, no playlists, just whatever the station was playing that day. But at the time, that was luxury. It was like the house had a voice. Eventually, stereo systems, boomboxes, and personal devices replaced the need. But if you ever stood under one of those tinny speakers and listened to Glenn Miller on a crackly station, you knew you were living in the future. Speaking of visions of the future, what about a bathroom that was all one color? Jell-O molds were not just recipes, they were performances. In the 1950s and 1960s, these shimmering towers of gelatin were the pride of dinner tables and potlucks alike. Suspended inside were slices of fruit, vegetables, nuts, and sometimes even meats, frozen in mid-dance by the wobble of lemon or lime gelatin. The molds themselves were often metal, shaped like flowers, domes, or decorative rings. Housewives practiced their releases with reverence, praying the mold would slide out cleanly with a satisfying thwack. The result? A glossy, surreal centerpiece. Guests gasped, children poked. Recipes were passed from neighbor to neighbor, each claiming their version was best. But these creations were not just about looks. Jell-O was cheap, shelf-stable, and forgiving. It let families stretch their ingredients during lean times. It made leftovers glamorous, and it brought a little joy to a time when people needed something bright and strange and wonderful. Eventually, tastes changed. Molds disappeared into cabinets. Jell-O became a snack cup. But for decades, it was art, it was pride, and it was love in a ring-shaped dish. When did we stop celebrating the food that made us smile before it ever touched our lips? Let us talk about the rumpus room. If the living room was where adults behaved themselves, the rumpus room was where the kids got wild. Usually tucked away in the basement, this was the unofficial playground of every suburban household from the 1950s to the 1970s. Carpeted in wall-to-wall shag, lit by lava lamps, and often filled with beanbag chairs, dartboards, and mismatched furniture, the rumpus room was every child's dream and every parent's secret weapon. You could send the kids down there for hours, let them roughhouse, make noise, and burn off all that energy while the grown-ups enjoyed some blessed peace upstairs. It was not about looking nice, it was about cutting loose. Some had jukeboxes, others had board games stacked to the ceiling, and every now and then, you would find a couch that doubled as a trampoline. It was chaos, but it was controlled chaos. Over time, the idea faded as homes got bigger and open concepts took over. Now, everything is multifunctional. But there was something beautiful about a room that existed just for noise, mess, and memory making. The name says it all, Rumpus. No rules, just vibes. But even in the loudest house, you still needed a way to call the kids upstairs. And you will not believe how we used to do that. The step-down bathtub was supposed to bring spa-level relaxation into your home. Instead, it brought stubbed toes, twisted ankles, and more than a few emergency room visits. These sunken tubs looked sleek in design magazines, especially when surrounded by lush ferns and candlelight. But reality hit hard the moment you tried to use one. They were awkward to get into, nearly impossible to clean, and posed a serious risk to anyone with limited mobility. The edge was invisible to the untrained eye, so guests would stumble, kids would fall in, and elderly family members avoided them altogether. On top of that, the plumbing was often complicated, the water lines were hard to access, and the moisture around the recessed area led to mold problems. For a feature that took up so much space, the step-down tub delivered very little comfort in return. And unlike a regular tub, you could not just swap it out. It was built into the foundation. Expensive to install, expensive to remove, and all too easy to regret. But even if you managed to climb out in one piece, your next problem was likely waiting for you in the kitchen. The Coldspot refrigerator was not just an appliance. It was the promise of a modern American life, humming quietly behind a steel door. Born in 1928 and sold by Sears for nearly 50 years, it was as dependable as it was beautiful. But in 1935, the Coldspot became something extraordinary. That year, legendary designer Raymond Loewy transformed it into a sleek, curved monument to the future. Gone were the clunky bolts and exposed hinges. In their place, smooth lines, minimal handles, and a shape that looked more like a Cadillac fender than a food locker. It was the first refrigerator to look good in the spotlight, not just behind the scenes. Inside, it had adjustable shelves, crisper drawers, and butter compartments, all luxuries at the time. It was quiet, reliable, and built to last for decades. Families placed cherished leftovers in its embrace. Birthday cakes, cold fried chicken, pitchers of lemonade. This was where comfort lived. And yet, the Coldspot's legacy faded as mass manufacturing favored cheaper materials and disposable models. The beauty disappeared. The silence was replaced with buzz and blinking lights, and the promise of forever was swapped for one-year warranties. When did we decide that cold convenience was more important than warm design? Once upon a time, you did not just decorate your bathroom, you committed to it. We are talking full-color, floor-to-ceiling, single-shade devotion. Pastel pink, mint green, baby blue, or the ever-famous avocado, these were the color-coordinated bathroom suites of the 1950s through the 1970s. And when we say coordinated, we mean everything. The toilet, the tub, the sink, the tile, sometimes even the toilet paper, matched like a showroom display. First Lady Mamie Eisenhower helped popularize the trend with what people dubbed Mamie Pink. Entire homes were built with these candy-colored palettes baked into their bones. But of course, color trends change. What once looked stylish and luxurious now feels a bit like stepping into a cartoon. As minimalism took hold in the 1990s and 2000s, bold bathroom hues were slowly wiped away, replaced by whites, grays, and beige. Still, those vivid bathroom suites had a kind of joy to them. They made you feel something, even if that something was confusion. And if the color did not impress you, the next home feature definitely would, especially if you ever hated carrying a heavy laundry basket down the stairs. Pea gravel patios looked charming in home improvement magazines, rustic, effortless, a little slice of the French countryside dropped into a suburban backyard. But once they were installed, the reality quickly set in. These patios were nothing more than a layer of loose, sharp-edged stones that never stayed in place. Chairs sank into them, tables wobbled, and walking barefoot was out of the question unless you had calluses like leather. Every breeze sent pebbles scattering into the grass, and lawnmowers did not take kindly to rogue gravel. Kids hated playing on it. Pets tracked it indoors, and any kind of sweeping or raking turned into a full-blown yard battle. Even worse, the so-called drainage benefits rarely worked out, leaving the area soggy in winter and scorched in summer. Within a year, most patios looked patchy and uneven, like a poorly maintained construction site rather than a space for relaxation. Homeowners tried tamping the gravel down, adding edging, even gluing it in place, but nothing made it better. It was a great idea in theory, undone by the simplest problem: gravel rolls and people fall. Still, even inside the house, that same mix of fashion and frustration kept showing up, especially in the form of a curtain that was not quite a wall and not quite anything useful at all. The O'Keefe and Merritt Aristocrat range was not just a stove, it was a throne. Towering over every other appliance in the room, this 734-pound marvel was the ultimate status symbol in post-war kitchens. It did not whisper innovation, it shouted it. With twin ovens, broilers, warming drawers, and a built-in timer clock, it looked like something from a science fiction movie, only real. Housewives of the 1940s and 1950s dreamed of owning one. Advertisements called it the Cadillac of kitchen ranges, and they were not exaggerating. You could roast a turkey, bake a pie, broil steaks, and warm dinner rolls at the same time. It was massive, yes, but that size came with function. Wide enamel cooktops offered space for every pot and pan. The dials were thick, confident, and satisfying to turn. It felt like driving a classic car, slow, powerful, and designed to last forever. But time moves fast. Kitchens shrank. Stainless steel arrived. And the Aristocrat, once a dream, became too heavy, too large, too old-fashioned. Most were discarded during remodels, sold for scrap or left in garages like relics from a forgotten empire. But ask anyone who grew up with one, and they will tell you that stove made cooking feel like a ceremony. When did we decide that smaller meant better? Walk into an old house and open a closet door, and you might get hit with a smell that is oddly comforting. Woody, warm, a little spicy. That would be cedar, not a scent diffuser, not a spray. Actual cedar wood, lined across the walls of the closet from top to bottom. These cedar-lined closets were the silent guardians of America's wardrobes. They protected against moths, mildew, and musty smells. But they also added a kind of rustic luxury, like storing your clothes inside a tree trunk at a high-end cabin. The idea was simple. Cedar wood naturally repels insects, so why not turn your entire closet into a bug-proof haven? People did not just store coats in there, they kept heirlooms, wool suits, and seasonal clothes safe year-round. Some closets were fully lined, others just had a single cedar panel on one wall. Either way, it gave the whole room a spa vibe long before that was a thing. These days, you might see cedar blocks or hangers sold in stores, but entire closets made of the stuff? That has faded into the woodwork, literally. The world got synthetic, and the cedar charm became a relic. But if you think that was clever, wait until you see how people used to pass food across rooms without ever leaving their chair. The promise of modular furniture was simple: flexibility, creativity, and smart design for small spaces. What we got instead was a collection of flimsy particle board pieces that wobbled with every move. These were the stackable shelves, folding tables, and interchangeable couch systems that dominated catalogs in the 1970s. And on paper, they made sense. Custom configurations, easy to rearrange, and light enough to move around by yourself. But there was a reason they were light. They were also fragile. The locking mechanisms broke, the cheap finishes peeled, and what looked cool in the store rarely held up under the daily wear of real life. Coffee tables would sag in the middle. Bookshelves leaned like tired soldiers. Even the stylish-looking modular couches were uncomfortable and awkward to clean. Some homeowners embraced the idea at first, charmed by the sense of innovation. But over time, the frustration set in. The dream of flexible living turned into a house full of disposable furniture. And if the modular design failed to impress, the next status symbol at least came with its own built-in glamour, until nobody wanted it anymore. The Philco Predicta television looked like it belonged in a spaceship, not a living room. Its bold design, featuring a separate swivel screen perched atop a futuristic base, turned heads the moment it arrived in 1958. This was not just a television. This was the future. The Predicta came in a range of pastel colors, with names like Holiday and Pedestal. It was slim, sleek, and shockingly modern in a time when televisions still looked like wooden trunks. For the first time, you could turn the screen without moving the entire cabinet. It was clever. It was playful. It made you feel like tomorrow had already arrived. But the beauty came at a price. Technicians hated servicing it. Components wore out quickly. Still, families loved it. They gathered around it, cross-legged on shag rugs, watching black and white broadcasts with wide eyes. It made television magical. Not background noise, not distraction. Magic. But magic is fragile. And soon, newer sets with fewer quirks replaced it. The Predicta faded into memory, too strange for the mainstream, too delicate for time. Now it lives in vintage stores and collectors' basements, quietly glowing with nostalgia. How did the most visionary television of its era become a footnote in history? And if you think delivering milk through a wall sounds wild, wait until you hear about the homes that were designed for smoke. Back in the middle of the 20th century, smoking was not just accepted, it was expected, and American homes were ready for it. That is where built-in ashtray stands came in. These were not just ashtrays placed on coffee tables or countertops. No, these were recessed, often permanent fixtures embedded right into walls, armrests, and even lampstands. You could walk into a living room, and there it was, your own little designated smoke spot, classy as could be. Some were ceramic, some were chrome. A few even had lids to keep the ashes tidy. And they were everywhere, in kitchens, in bathrooms, in bedrooms. The ultimate sign of a home that was with it. Even guests had their own designated ashtrays. People took pride in them. Some were decorative, shaped like seashells or horseshoes. Others were sleek and utilitarian, and it was not just adults using them. Teens had their own, often built into the back of desks or vanities. Today, of course, the idea seems almost alien. We cover smoke detectors in foil just to cook without setting them off. But back then, these ashtrays were part of the home's soul. And when the culture shifted, they vanished fast, ripped out, tiled over, or collecting dust as relics of a time no one wants to remember, but no one can forget. But the next room? Oh, that is where the real memories were made. Think beanbags, shag carpet, and absolute chaos. Popcorn ceilings were everywhere, and you did not think twice about them until one started flaking into your cereal. Created as an easy solution for soundproofing and hiding imperfections, these textured ceilings were sprayed on like cheap whipped cream, giving homes a bumpy, cratered look that no one questioned until they started falling apart. Vacuuming the ceiling became an actual task in some households, and painting over them was a test of endurance and futility. But the real danger was deeper than dust. Many popcorn ceilings contained asbestos, a now-banned toxic material that can cause serious health issues. Once people found out, the ceiling went from being just ugly to outright terrifying. Suddenly, every flake falling from above felt like a silent threat you could not ignore. That meant removing them was not just inconvenient, it was dangerous and expensive. Families who had lived under them for years were suddenly advised to bring in professionals just to make their homes safe again. Something meant to be invisible became the most threatening part of the room. And the disasters did not stop there. Just take a look under your feet. The Teasmade was not just a novelty. It was a revolution in how mornings began. A combination alarm clock and tea maker, it became a fixture in British bedrooms and a curious but beloved import in mid-century American homes. Imagine waking to the gentle hiss of boiling water, the soft clink of porcelain, and the smell of fresh brewed tea wafting through the air before your feet ever touched the floor. The Teasmade delivered this magic through simple but elegant engineering. A timer triggered the kettle. A mechanical arm poured the boiling water into a waiting teacup. No fumbling in the kitchen, no slamming drawers, just warmth and calm. Some models even included a gentle nightlight, glowing softly on your bedside table like a companion. It turned mornings into rituals. But rituals are easy to break. Coffee took over. Digital clocks became the norm. And the quiet grace of the Teasmade was forgotten. Now it exists mostly in memories and dusty attics. But for those who used one, the association is immediate. Peace, intention. A morning that cared for you instead of demanded something from you. When did we trade thoughtful awakenings for jarring alarms and paper cups? Which of these forgotten features do you miss most? Tell us below and tap like and subscribe for more kitchen memories worth reviving.